I'm Lawrence Francis, host of Interpreting Wine, the place to learn from thought leaders in the world of wine and marketing, welcoming you to the Wine Growers British Columbia series, a specially commissioned two-part series recorded at Taste Canada 2022 annual tasting in London, exploring British Columbia's North and South Okanagan Valleys in the company of the people who make wine and live in the region. This marks another first for Interpreting Wine, creating the benchmark podcast content for the region. We kick off today's first episode with a South Okanagan Valley regional overview in the company of Severine Pinte, winemaker at Vieux and Lastella wineries. She orientates us to the culture, geography and geology of this fascinating region, highlighting sustainability initiatives taking place, following which each winery representative orientates us to their specific place within the valley. Before tasting one of their wines they brought to the annual tasting, there are also details from each of them about whether the wines are already imported or whether they're seeking representation. Enjoy!
So I'm Severine Pinte. I'm the winemaker, viticulturalist, and managing partner of two wineries in the South Okanagan, BC. Vieux Winery, which is in Oliver, and Lastella Winery in Osoyoos. Vieux Winery was founded and opened in 2005, and Lastella in 2006. And basically, Vieux Winery is kind of oriented to produce wine from BC, but with the French style, and in the Rhone Valley, we do a lot of Syrah and some a white blend with Vieux, Roussanne, and Marsanne. And Lastella, same thing. We have a food in BC with our terroir, our climate, and but we get inspired by some Italian wine. So we produce some Super Tuscan, some very nice Merlot, and some crispy white Pinot Grigio, for example. So I arrived in 2010, immigrating from France. I've been making wine since 1997, and I've been in the Okanagan, South Okanagan, for about 12 years now, and I've seen the region grow tremendously from mindset into how to manage the vineyards. There's more and more precision viticulture with knowing our soils, knowing how to irrigate, because we can't forget that the South Okanagan and the Okanagan is a desert. It's the only desert in Canada, and temperatures are really high during the summer, and if we didn't irrigate, we couldn't grow anything. So irrigation is part of our daily vineyard management skills. And it's a very tight community. There's a lot of wineries in the Okanagan, and South Okanagan, the Black Sage Bench, the famous Black Sage Bench, is probably representing a large amount of the acreages that are planted in vines in the Okanagan. And basically, if we talk geology, right just north of Oliver, there's kind of a cliff that's called the McIntyre Bluff, and the glacier a long time ago was right there, and it was a very narrow point. And when the glacier melted, it took down with him a lot of sediment that landed in multiple terraces on the east side of the valley, and so we have a lot of sand with some kind of there's a vein with some round rocks. I have a vineyard where I get grapes from, and I call it my little Châteauneuf-du-Pape, because it's literally like Châteauneuf-du-Pape, the rocks. And then on the right side of the valley, so on the west side, it's a little bit steeper, and so we have a bit more moraine, a bit more granite, some kind of volcano debris that came from the nearby valley, and lots of alluvial fan. So it's known as the Golden Mile Bench, and the terroir there and the soil are a little bit more complex. So when you enter the South Okanagan, it's really this its own kind of microclimate. It's a lot warmer than just a few kilometers north in Penticton, for example. And the geology is very unique. And we have two different, we have the warm side and we have the cool side because the sun goes down and the mountain is quite steep on the west side. So really a multitude of different terroirs, a multitude of within that microclimate, microclimate, MI. And it's a pleasure to work with because we as winemakers and viticulturists can pick and choose. It's like we're artists, and then we have a palette of color, and then we can take a little bit of red and a little bit of orange and yellow, and then we can build our wines like this. When I came in 2010, lots of people asked me, "So are you crazy? You live in France? Why?" And every day since then, I pitch myself every morning when I drive to work because this is a fantastic region. There is the seasons are really well defined. Right now, we just had the flowering happening, and you have to remember the valley is a kind of a narrow valley stretched from the Washington state border all the way up to Lake Country north. It's about 250 kilometers. And there's lakes in the valley bottom. And so the lakes are blue. Then when you go up a little bit on the terraces, and it's orchards, vineyard, and we have cherry trees, apricot, peaches, apples, pears, and then all those different colors of flowers is just like it's like almost like we're walking in heaven, if heaven could be a place where there's lots of flowers. And then the green is coming up, and during the summer it's very luscious. We are very because it's beautiful. There's the lake, there's lots of hiking to do, there's lots of wineries, so the tourism is quite important. It's part of our economy in South Okanagan and in the Okanagan in general. And then of course in the fall, because it's all covered in vineyard, when the fall happens and the grapes are picked, then we have this magnificent colors that go throughout the valley. With like, I often try to hike at the top of that McIntyre Bluff, that cliff, and overlooking the valley all the way to the Washington state border, and it's just like a rainbow of colors. There's green, there's orange, there's red, and the valley is kind of it's just not flat. Like I said, there's those terraces and there's a little bit of hills, and it's absolutely beautiful. And in the winter, we're lucky. We have a little bit of snow, and there's some ski resort nearby, and we often have kind of a low cloud, so in order to reach the sun in the winter, we go up in the ski resort, and then we enjoy the terrain and what BC has to offer. And then really, I will never regret my move in 2010. When I arrived in 2010, the industry had already started to work on a sustainability program. So that started in 2008, and from 2008 to 2020, where we launched the certification program, the industry developed a sustainability program. So what does that mean? Is it different from organic? Is it different from biodynamic? It is. Like, when you're sustainable, you can farm organically. You don't need to be certified, because you can leave yourself the opportunity to treat. Like if you have, like for example, we're in a desert in the Okanagan, and we don't have much disease pressure. Botrytis is almost never there. Mildew is almost never there. So, because we have a lot of wind, a lot of high temperature during the summer, but we do have, for example, some leafhoppers. And then leafhoppers, it's really hard to fight organically. So we do leave ourselves the opportunity to do that. Because being sustainable is just not only having some very mindful practices in the vineyard, it's also making sure that we are economically viable, and also making sure that our people, our neighbors, our staff, our client, they're all working in harmony. And so when we match those three pillars, we actually can get certified. So the certification is there's a standard in the vineyard and in the winery, and it's outcome based. And so we have goals, and it's a continuous process. So you get certified on year 0, and then on year 3 we're going to have another audit, and in between we have to prove that we are moving forward. And Le Vieux and Lastella Winery and their vineyards have been certified in July 2021. We were one of the first wineries and vineyard to be certified. And really what it did is I was able to look at our operations and at our way of working with a magnifying glass and really look into, are we doing this right? Like, we've been working like that for almost 15 years. What can we improve? And really digging deep into, for example, precision viticulture. Do we know our soils? Do we know the water retention capacity of our soils? Do we know, because we have to irrigate, so do we have to irrigate the same way every soil? And then the reason is no. The answer is no. We can, some blocks have a better water retention capacity, and we don't need to irrigate that at all during the whole season. And then some blocks will have to irrigate half an hour every day because the water just goes down in the soil very quickly. So being sustainable is allowing, I think, every businesses to work better, to just question our way of working, and as a community improve and really show the world, because the standards have been created looking at what other regions were doing. We didn't reinvent the wheel, so we looked at what Napa, New Zealand, France were doing, and we just created some standards that were adapted to British Columbia and working towards that. But really, it's going to help the BC industry, wine industry, to reach the international standard, and in being able to come, for example, to London, show our wines, and having people say, wow, you actually do something very nice. So there's actually another winery today that's present at the Canada House, Staggs that just got certified as well, their vineyard and winery. So there's actually 2 entities today presented. The BC wine industry is it's quite young compared to all the wine industry in the world. And when you look at who is actually making the wine, the actors on every day, it's a very interesting combination of people that are self-made, people that are coming from many countries. I'm coming from France. There's many people that have studied in Australia, New Zealand, Germany. So we have a real mix of knowledge, of savoir-faire. And we have some rules. We have the Vintner Quality Alliance, the VQA program, that is basically determining some certification of origin. And we're not like France or with appellation with strict rules about yield, about how to do the wine. So there's a lot of self improvisation or self technique that are kind of characteristic to every winery. And a lot of people are experimenting with natural, with low intervention viticulture and winemaking. There's people that are really looking just at the numbers. It's a very wide range of techniques. I wouldn't say that there's a style per se of winemaking. I think what's directing more the style of the wine is the climate and the terroir, because it's a desert, but we have very cool nights. So we have, sometimes it can be 35, 40 during the day, and then we can go down to 15 at night. So the plants it allows the plants to rest, and then so we conserve a lot of natural acidity. So what's going to happen if you come and taste at the Canada House, you can probably identify that there's an underlying similarity in all the wines from British Columbia, is that natural acidity on the back palate that's kind of determining the overall architecture of the wine. And I think that would be maybe what the main characteristic. So the first wine we're going to talk about today is the Syrah Cuvée Violette 2020. So it's produced by Le Vieux Winery in Oliver. We're represented by Flint Wines here in London. And so the Cuvée Violette, the Syrah, is one of my favorite wine, just because we have so many different terroirs. We have on the east side the Black Sage Bench. We have just north of the Black Sage Bench there is that block with the nice rocks. On the Golden Mile we have cooler sites. Down in Osoyoos on the lake we have some vineyards that are really, that's probably the hottest site that we have. And I get Syrah from all those different places. So everything is picked by hand, brought to the winery, double sorted, and then put in tanks and then vinified separately. So we have a variety of tanks, the concrete, oak, vats, stainless steel, and the Cuvée Violette is for me the representation of the feminine side of the Syrah. When I drink that wine, it's lots of violet flowers, very delicate, elegant aromas, and in the mouth, it's just some silky tannins. It's like a caress. Like the wine has a architecture, like we have that underlying acidity that I was talking about, but the tannins are so soft, but yet the wine is a nice structure, and for me, this is the most beautiful representation of the Syrah, and I feel like I'm a little bit of a painter with a little bit of orange, a little bit of yellow, and then creating every year those different palettes, because we also have some Syrah that are a lot more structured. That would be the Cuvée Classique that we do at Le Vieux as well, and some garrigue, some more tabac, more savory aromas. But the violet that we're drinking today is just when I make the blend, I imagine this very elegant lady running on the fashion show wearing some Chanel and Christian Dior, and it's just like flowing, some very nice elegant wine. Winemaking wise, I believe that if I have good grapes, I can make good wines. So we're really working hard in the vineyard to produce the best grape possible, and that way we have a very low intervention winemaking process. The Syrah I picked usually the last half of October, so the temperature in the morning are quite cold. So the grapes goes in a tank already like around 3-4 Celsius. So there's a natural cold maceration that's happening, and after that, really there's no recipe. It's just going to work the grapes according to what they taste. I spend a lot of time in the vineyard, walking the rows and tasting the berries to pick at the right time when it tastes good. I don't really care about the pH or the TA or all that. Is just does it taste good? Is the tannin ready? Do I have the flavors that I can taste, and I can see in the future what the wine is going to be looking like? And when it's ready, we pick. And after that is just a normal process of winemaking. A little bit of pump overs, a little bit parched down, and like that. I love this wine with some lamb chops, the little popsicle on the barbecue with a little bit of rosemary and thyme. It's spring season, it's the barbecue time, and that's, I think, one of my best pairing. And the wine that we're going to taste from Lastella is the 2018 Maestoso. It's our single Merlot block, our flagship at Lastella. And Lastella is also distributed by Flint Wines in London here. And little story about Lastella. So Lastella is in Osoyoos, right on the lake. If you do come to visit, now that we can do that and travel, you can rent a boat, arrive on the dock, and then walk up the hill and just arrive on the patio and then sit down. And it's like really being in Tuscany and being on the rolling hills. It's absolutely stunning. That was my first day in Canada on August 6, 2010, and I had to pinch myself to make sure that this is really where I was going to work. It was absolutely stunning. And when I came to Lastella and from south of France, and I saw that Lastella was making lots of Merlot, I was just like, I was a bit skeptical. And over the years, I learned to love the Merlots. South Okanagan, it's one of the Merlot. We have to remember that's one of the most planted grapes in the Okanagan. And in the South Okanagan, especially that higher terrace that we have at Lastella, where the maestoso is coming from, sees the sun from the morning to the evening, and we have this really rich, juicy, red fruit, super ripe, and again the tannins are present. But they're big, but they're not chalky or aggressive, or they're big, but they're velvety. And so when we pick those grapes again, I'm going to go in the vineyard and taste, and then I make sure that the seeds doesn't go completely lignified. I like to have a little bit of a still green on the seed, just because otherwise I think I feel like it goes overripe very quickly with the Merlot. And the maestoso is again double sorted and picked. At Lastella, we worked by gravity, so we come in and process on the upper crush pad, and it falls into the tank that is down below. We just have open a big hole in the concrete, and it goes down. And so there's very little manipulation. Goes in an oak vat, and then it's just very gentle punch down. So very gentle extraction of those nice tannin. And then after that, when the wine is made, it goes into a mix of new French oak barrel and then some used barrel, just so that the oak is just going to bring a little bit of increase the complexity of the wine, but not overpower. And then what we have after that is this magnificent, opulent Merlot. So the wine at Lastella are named after musical notes. So maestoso is the big one, is the maestro, right? Is the one conducting, and I think it's a very good example of what South Okanagan can produce in terms of Merlot. When I think maestoso, I think of that big piece of steaks, like the ribeye, that again you put on a barbecue, and you don't need any complex sauce to go with it. Just a simple taste of the meat and going with the maestoso. Also, with some nice stronger cheese, like. But like a dry, not a soft cheese, that would work very well with it, like almost like a Cantal. Like I'm thinking about my origins in France and the Massif Central, and that would go very well with it.
Poetic but accurate descriptions there from Severine, which I think are the very best kind. I found it interesting that a winemaker who is so obviously connected to her French roots has found an approach and a terroir that expresses something uniquely Okanagan in her wines. Interestingly, the next winery that we meet also has its stylistic roots in France, however this time focusing on the ageability of the region's wines.
My name is Michael Kuhlman. I'm the winemaker technical director at Syrah Estate Winery. So Syrah was started in 1998. It was a joint venture between Le Groupe Taillant and Vieux. So Vieux was a big Canadian wine company, and Groupe Taillant was based in Bordeaux. And the idea behind Syrah was to have this Canadian Bordeaux. So it was very much like the Bordeaux savoir-faire. And so we always worked with Bordeaux winemakers. Myself, I was trained in Bordeaux at the University of Bordeaux, and then really showcased the beautiful and wonderful terroir we have in the South Okanagan. So, and then in 2013, the Groupe Taillant bought out the 50% share of Vieux and became the sole owners. So we have 80 acres, 31 hectares of grapevines overlooking Syrah Lake. We're about 300 meters in elevation. We just grow red Bordeaux varieties for the time being. We're predominantly Merlot, about 64% Merlot, roughly 15% Cabernet Sauvignon, 50% Cabernet Franc, and the rest is a bit of Malbec and a bit of Petit Verdot. For us, the vineyard is the most important place. We've always said, and it's part of our history, it's part of our culture, is that the vineyard is the most important. It's where great wines are made. And so before I took the position as a winemaker, I was the vineyard manager for 3 years. And so what we're really interested in working with is how we can obviously showcase the terroir, how we can make the most of this beautiful area, and really take it to the next level. So a bit about the area. I mean, we're actually in a pocket desert. So not many people realize this when they speak about Canada. A lot of people imagine cool climate wines, but last year we have a weather station on the vineyard and we hit 48.5 degrees. And for about 12 days straight, we're at plus 40 for 12 hours a day. So it was quite intense, but that was during that quite famous heat dome. So that was quite stressful. And then obviously in the winter, it goes down to about minus 25. So we have this massive temperature change, and a part of me wonders if maybe we hit a record for wine growing regions with the biggest temperature difference between winter and summer. So we have these 31 hectares which overlook the Syrah Lake. It's a mix of loamy and sandy soils, but then we do have some gravel on the upper benches of the vineyard. It's very alluvial from when the glaciers and lakes were there in about between 13 and 15,000 years ago. When it came through, it deposited a whole load of sand, silt, and there's even a beard of clay in some of the lower blocks. We, compared to all the other wineries at the tasting today, I think we're at the southern tip. I think we're the southernmost, we're the southernest winery. Can you say that? So yeah, I mean, I believe, I think we have an absolutely beautiful terroir. And we are going to be certified organic in 2022. When I arrived 3 years ago, I was convinced that it was really important for us to go organic because it didn't actually change much of what we were doing. But even that, I really wanted to work a lot with cover crops, with biodiversity, to really minimize our impact on this beautiful landscape, because it is a beautiful landscape. We're surrounded by wilderness. We don't have any neighbors. We don't have any vineyards planted next to us. What we've got around us is just desert and a really fragile ecosystem around us. So I thought it was really important, and as a company, we feel it was really important to minimize our impact. So that what we have is that we work a lot with cover crops to reduce, and it's a weird way of putting it, but planting cover crops in the long term will allow us to irrigate less. So the idea was we plant cover crops, we plant different cover crops at different areas in the vineyard, we let them grow, and then we'll knock them down sometime in the summer, and it'll basically create a mulch, and that will keep a lot of humidity in the soil. And that obviously allows us to irrigate less, but also I believe it keeps a lot of freshness to the wines. As the vines won't get as stressed in the extreme heat we get, it will keep a lot of freshness, and that has a real effect when it comes to us in the cellar and the winemaking, is that it keeps that freshness, that acidity, which you need for great wines that can age. We have a zero insecticide approach. And so what we do is we do something called integrated pest management, IPM, where I hire a lot of poor interns who spend 6 months with me and they count a lot of insects and they track the stages of all the different insects so that we can track the damage they're causing and we can make management decisions at the right time, which means that we don't have to use insecticides. I mean, it could be that in a couple of years we'll have to do one insecticide, but it'll be an organic insecticide. But we've done 3 years so far without insecticides and it's going well. So yeah, at the moment we don't have any representation in the UK, but the UK market is a really interesting market for us. I think the UK has a really diverse wine scene. It's got wines from around the world, and it's something we're really interested in breaking into. So I think we've got a glass of the Syrah La Rose Le Grand Vin 2013. This is a classic Bordeaux blend, predominantly Merlot. So Merlot, about 60% Merlot, 10-15% Cabernet Sauvignon, 10-15% Cabernet Franc, and then a bit of Malbec and a bit of Petit Verdot. So this is the 2013 vintage. The 2013 was quite a classic vintage in the valley. We had quite a cold winter. Spring was fairly dry, and then it wasn't any major issues. So in terms of winemaking, obviously we have a very strong Bordeaux connection, as everybody in the team basically learned to make wine in Bordeaux. And we use stainless steel tanks, temperature controlled. cold soak maceration, a bit of hot soak maceration afterwards, and then it goes into barrel for about a year. Obviously French oak, medium toast, usually about 60% new, 40% 1 or 2 years old. I think it's still got a really nice freshness to it. You still get some nice fresh fruit to it, but it's starting to develop those tertiary aromas, which you get in nice wines. And what I really like about the 2013 vintage is why I brought it here today, is that it's still got that freshness to it. It's still quite vibrant. It's still got a lot to give. And what we think is really important, what I want to showcase, is that the Okanagan Valley has a lot to offer, and wines from the Okanagan Valley, not just a Syrah Rose, can age really gracefully and really well. And I think that's the marker of a great, I hate to use the word, but terroir.
Great to hear more about the winery's vineyard practices in an otherwise very hot region, locking in that trademark freshness in a mindful and sustainable way that I found come together into quite a classic wine with links to Bordeaux, but that has a freshness that really speaks to the Okanagan Valley. Our next stop actually takes us to 2 wineries that are owned by the same group, and as is typical for London at any time of year, there was some roadworks happening just outside the window that we couldn't quite get away from.
So my name is Graham Norton. I'm the general manager for the iconic wineries of British Columbia. We're a collection and collective of incredibly passionate winemakers in the Okanagan Valley, representing 6 different estates. We'll be talking about 2 wineries this afternoon. The first one will be Checkmate Artisanal Winery. So Checkmate Artisanal Winery is located in the South Okanagan on the first sub-GI in British Columbia on the Golden Mile Bench. And our history is interesting in that the winery's first vintage, we were established in 2012. We built the winery. Our first vintage was 2013, but quite historical in terms of how long and the pedigree that the vineyards have for us dating back in the South Okanagan. So where Checkmate's located, really the focus of the winery is on 2 varietals. It's Chardonnay and Merlot. The Chardonnay has our oldest vines were planted in 1973, and so we're very excited that these are some of the oldest vines of Chardonnay in not just British Columbia but in Canada, and that's really the focus of the winery is being able to produce new world Chardonnay with an old world elegance and something that's truly next world. And so we produce 7 different Chardonnays. One of them we'll be talking about today, 4 different Merlots, all site-specific wines, all incredibly small production. So where we are, the winery is located in the South Okanagan. All of our estate vineyards are entirely in the South Okanagan as well. So 5 different estate vineyard sites ranging in vineyard age from 25 years old up to 45 years plus. Where the winery is on the Golden Mile Bench, you've got this really diversity across the South Okanagan, but on the Golden Mile Bench where we are, we've got 2 of our estate vineyards there, so it's part of an alluvial fan. That's obviously a very interesting and unique part of the South Okanagan. The other 3 vineyards are located on the eastern side. So when you think about the South Okanagan, much different. There's a lot of difference between north and south in the Okanagan Valley, but then in east and west. So the western side, where we are, where the winery is located, is part of that alluvial fan on the Golden Mile Bench side, as I was saying. And then you've got that Black Sage Bench, all a Soyuz East Bench on the eastern side. So you've got variety of soil, much more stony, rocky, gravelly on the alluvial side, on the Golden Mile western side, and then you've got much more of a sandy loam as a result of glacial melt on the eastern side. So much different soil east and west, and then in terms of climate, it's interesting because where the winery is located on the western side, on the Golden Mile Bench, it's actually underneath a very high mountain range, Mount Cobo. So because of that, we get a lot of morning sun, but not as much afternoon sun as the sun starts to set on the western side. So the 2 vineyards that are located on the western side, the sun will set typically there, in the growing season around 6:30 at night, whereas on the eastern vineyards, we might get sun till 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. So it allows us to also tell the story at the winery because all of the wines are site-specific, not just of site and soil, but also climate and growing conditions and all those kind of things. So that's really what we're trying to do at Checkmate is with these 2 varietals tell the story of sense of place and where the wines are coming from. So the Chardonnay that we are going to be pouring for you today is our 2018 Attack Chardonnay from Checkmate Artisanal Winery. So this 100% Chardonnay is a blend of two of our estate vineyards, one both on the eastern side of the South Okanagan. 65% of this wine is coming from our Jagged Rock vineyard, which is along the Black Sage Bench, and the other 35% of this wine is coming from our Osoyoos Borda Vista vineyard, which is right down on the U.S. border in Osoyoos, both on the eastern side. So you get, I think, that interesting combination of that very fine sandy soil coming from Borda Vista right down the U.S. border, very, very hot. And then Jagged Rock is more of that sandy loam kind of soil coming off of the Black Sage Bench. So two outstanding vineyards. Both were planted in the late 90s, so now 20, 25 plus years old. And again, 100% Chardonnay. This is two clones of Chardonnay. One is a Dijon clone 76 that we have planted at Borda Vista Vineyard. And then the other clone is, we call it the De Cleva clone. It's a heritage clone that we have planted at Jagged Rock Vineyard at Black Sage Bench. This is a historical clone for us because it's actually cuttings from our home site where Checkmate's located, of the original vineyard at Checkmate that was planted in 1973. So it's one that is a very important clone of Chardonnay for us, and really a heritage clone at Checkmate. So that's the nature of the wine. From a grape growing perspective, we started farming these vineyards organically in 2017, and then the winery and all of our vineyards as of vintage 2021 are all certified organic. So now vintage 2018 is the first start of our organic farming practices in the South Okanagan. Everything here is handpicked at night. From a winemaking perspective, the fruit is then brought first very early morning into the winery. We're able to keep it cool all the way through. This wine is actually unique in that this is the only wine that we use this particular vessel for. So the entire production of this wine is one single French oak foudre. So it's a large 1,600 liter French oval cask, and that single cask is the entire production of this wine. So the foudre is entirely new. We ferment this wine wild, let it ferment naturally, and then it's aged after it completes fermentation. It's aged in the same vessel for 16 months. We then rack it. It's bottled, unfined, unfiltered, and then it's aged another couple years in the bottle. So this 2018 is our current vintage release of Chardonnay. One of the unique things about the region is that we've got very, very hot days, but really cool nights. So it can, in the South Okanagan can come up to 35, 40 degrees in the summertime, but the temperature will drop down to 10 degrees at night. So those large diurnal temperature swings are really key. It allows us to ripen fruit, get intensity of fruit, incredible character, but at the same time maintain freshness and vibrancy and acidity. And I think certainly that's really a hallmark of this wine because of the vessel that it's aged in, because of this large foudre oval cask. There's less influence of the oak, so it allows us to be able to build some of that mid-weight texture, a great palate, with maintaining the vibrancy and the freshness of the fruit. And for me, this wine, it's unique in the 7 different Chardonnays that we make, that there's a real kind of salinity, salt water, cold tea, Asian spice, variety of different things going on here that I think is really indicative both of the site selection, but then also the vessel that it's aged in. So it's out of the 7, this is one of my favorite wines every vintage because it's got such hallmark characteristics that the other wines don't have. So now we've got in the glass our 2020 Mission Hill Family Estate Terroir Collection Cabernet Franc. So the Terroir Collection is our single vineyard series from Mission Hill Family Estate, now coming into our 41st vintage in the Okanagan Valley. So when Mission Hill was established in 1981, it was the 5th established winery in the Okanagan, still family owned today. This, again, now exciting from a grape growing perspective. We're well into our organic transition here. And this vineyard, planted in the mid-90s, is one that's been a real flagship vineyard for us along the Black Sage Bench. It's Cabernet Franc is a varietal that we're really excited about, both at Mission Hill, and I think can be a hallmark grape for the South Okanagan. Traditionally a blending grape, not just in the Okanagan, but around the world. And we're really starting to see the potential of Cabernet Franc coming from the South Okanagan. And so we've only just started producing a single varietal Cabernet Franc from Mission Hill as of vintage 2015. So this is a relatively new and exciting wine for us, and it's a wine that just continues to get better and better every year. Now that, coming from 20 plus year old vineyard, farmed specifically to make a single vineyard, single varietal Cabernet Franc, not meant to be blended. So we farm it very differently from the beginning. And one that I think has really now become a hallmark grape and a hallmark wine for us at Mission Hill. So, what's also interesting from a winemaking perspective is this is Cabernet Franc that at the winery we make almost like Pinot Noir. So we really want to be able to highlight a lot of that primary fruit, the floral character, and maintain some of the vibrancy and freshness that Cabernet Franc can have, particularly coming from the South Okanagan. Ripeness coming from the warm days, acidity being maintained by the cool nights. And so this is a wine that's fermented entirely in concrete. So the entire production of this wine was 3 concrete vessels, and one of them we actually had the wines or the grapes completely a whole bunch. So whole bunch fermented, and then the other 2 fermenters were destemmed. So I think you're starting to also see the interest and the character coming from that whole bunch coming through in this wine. And then aged in French oak, and again, wanting to really be able to bring vibrancy and freshness, purity of fruit, and oh my gosh, when I think about the wine of what I think could be such a standout varietal for the South Okanagan, this is really a style that we're excited about. It really is all about that fruit, the primary fruit first. That this is still Cabernet Franc in the glass, but as you said, it's it's pretty, it's elegant, it's vibrant, it's fresh, and a wine that I think is just an exceptional food pairing wine because of that.
So interesting to try a Chardonnay from a warmer site in the valley. And zooming out, I think we can really appreciate the South Okanagan's ability to keep that freshness that many of us know and love. The Cab Franc I described on the day as pretty and so fruit-forward, I really feel that's the only way to describe this super drinkable wine. Next up, in the spirit of sharing and learning, we hear from a winery who is collaborating with Olivier Humbrecht, MW.
So my name is Ian Skrmetta, and I'm the estate director at the winery. The name of our winery is Phantom Creek Estates. We started producing wine in 2016 while the winery was under construction. We opened in June 2020, right in the middle of COVID, so that was very interesting. We focus on Alsatian-influenced whites, so Pinot Gris and Riesling are the backbone of our white wine program, and then Bordeaux-influenced reds. So we have focusing on all 5 Bordeaux varietals as well as Syrah is what we're doing. So we're just located in the south of the region, so we're right in between Oliver and Osoyoos, very hot climate. That's where the winery itself sits. So we have 3 vineyards surrounding the winery, and we also have a vineyard in the Similkameen Valley, which is a valley over, which is quite a bit cooler, and that's the heart of our white wine program. So this Riesling that we're going to taste today is our 2019 Riesling. This actually came from a producer just north of us up in Okanagan Falls, organically certified. So all the wines we're doing are organic and biodynamically farmed. The winery is now certified organic and biodynamic. So the first certified organic wines will come out in the 2020 vintage, so the vintage after this. But these were all done organically and biodynamically as well. So climate, quite hot actually in the south. So last summer, for example, in June, it got up to 46 degrees Celsius for about 10 days straight. So it can get quite hot in Canada, despite what people might think. It's a very hot climate, and this is why we're growing our whites are sourced from a bit further north or in the Similkameen Valley, which can be about quite a bit cooler. So Similkameen Valley has a taller mountain range on the side of it, so it gets quite a big temperature shift from morning to night, so get really good acid built up from that big temp swing during ripening. Yeah, so soil around us. So in the South Okanagan, well, all the Okanagan was created from big glacial event where a big glacier burst basically flooded out the entire valley. So a lot of material washed out. So very sandy soils. Our Phantom Creek vineyard right below us is pretty much 10 feet straight down to beach sand. Where this Riesling comes from, a lot more rockier. Material is quite a bit different, and it varies very quickly throughout the valley. So from our 2 vineyard sites, which are 500 feet away, you get drastically different soil conditions. So it's quite interesting. So we're currently looking for distribution in the UK. Our white winemaker, consulting white winemaker, is Olivier Humbrecht. So we're working with him, possibly going to end up working with his agency. So we'll see how that goes in the next day or two here. But we are currently looking for distribution. Nothing major in the UK because we're not a massive producer yet. So looking to be very strategic, targeted around restaurants, high-end restaurants, things like that. Yeah, so this is our 2019 Riesling. So grapes are sourced from Okanagan Falls, which is a bit further north from us. Quite a dry Riesling, so barely any residual sugar at all. Very floral. This vintage we did in 100% stainless steel. So our white wine program being Alsatian influence, we of course have a lot of Foudres in the winery. So the 2017 vintage we did in 100% Foudre, and then in 2018 it was a mix, and now 2019 it's all stainless steel. So we're kind of playing around with it, see what works best, and find a balance between what we want. Of course, you know, being Alsatian influence, we don't want to be Alsace. We want to be our own region. So finding out what works best for us and what works best for this grape. So yeah, the grape growing, as I mentioned, is organic biodynamic. This particular Riesling was sourced from an organically certified vineyard. So this vintage was done 6 months in stainless steel, and then it was racked off of the lees and bottled. Nose, very floral. Got some nice fruits on it, apricot, oranges, citrusy flavors. A lot of minerality as well from the vineyard sites. So as I mentioned, there's, you know, a lot of rocky material in the site that this was sourced from, and you can pick that up on the wine. We have in the winery, we have these big monoliths of core samples of the soil from each vineyard, and it's always fun to do the tours because you go through and you see it and you're like, okay, I get it. I can understand how it truly does end up in the glass. You can taste the terroir. But yeah, really nice minerality, and you'll find that in a lot of our wines, except for the Phantom Creek vineyard, which is beach sand, so quite a bit different.
My impression of this Riesling was that with the residual sugar dialed right back, it really exposed the influence of the terroir, and the refreshing, savoury mineral character are a Riesling lover's dream. We continued the conversations, welcoming back a former guest on Interpreting Wine, John Skinner of Painted Rock. And again, typical for London, the roadworks happened to return just at the wrong time.
I'm John Skinner, proprietor of Painted Rock Estate Winery. We started the winery from scratch in 2004, but we spent 4 years looking for what we hoped was the most prospective or the best terroir in the valley. I hired a team of consultants and they actually looked at 30 different projects, properties, whether they were vineyards or not planted, and they were going to give up after 4 years, and finally this one property came to their attention. It used to be the largest apricot orchard in the British Commonwealth, and it was very famous for that. It was felled 17 years before it was shown to me, so there were 800 stumps on it, and we spent a year analyzing the site, removing the stumps, and devised a really intentional planting strategy. I sourced all our varietals from top Bordeaux nursery, and I actually had to bribe the nursery to get the clones. They weren't going to sell them to me, and I paid them $1 a plant for 60,000 plants, $1 extra per plant, and I got everything I wanted. Well, fast forward the next year, and I get a call from Alain Soutre, one of the top consultants in Bordeaux, and he's friends with the nursery owner, and he said the nursery owner told him about my intentions and I should meet him. And he's worked for me for the last 17 years. And it's been a wonderful journey with him, and we're really getting there. So terroir, you know, it's a really interesting site because what makes us unique is the property slopes from the east to the west, and we intentionally planted east-west. A lot of people say plant north-south because it's sun comes up in the east, goes down to the west, it's going to affect. Well, because we have the 6 to 7 degree slope, it's more important to accommodate the wind than it is the sun. My consultants told me at the beginning, two things. You would, if you plant east-west, then that's going to move, when the sun goes down, that's going to move, it's going to sweep the heat off and create your acidity. If you plant north-south, that cool wind every night is going to affect the top row differently than the second row, differently than the third, different. And when you get extreme cold in the winter, it's going to affect the first row different, second, third, fourth. So that made a whole lot of sense. Plus, he said, and you're also going to have to terrace the property. Well, I bought this incredibly fabulous terroir. When we had to remove 800 stumps, we didn't bulldoze the property. We peeled the topsoil back, removed the stump, repaired the alluvial silt layer, and put the topsoil back, and did that 800 times. It took us a year, best year ever, because then we put weather station in the middle of the property, we put sensors everywhere, we augured a hole every 3 meters to know what was down there. And it was, you have one chance to do this from the beginning, and I really wanted to compete with the best wineries in the world. And technology is available to us, and I said, go ahead and do it. And thankfully, I didn't live there. I didn't stress about it. I just hired a team to do it. And all these years since, I wouldn't change a thing. We're really getting there. The site has over-delivered on its promise. And now, our first vintage was, we planted in 04. Our first vintage was 07. Now we just blended our 2020 reds last week, and it's fabulous vintage. So, we're getting there, and it's over-delivered on its promise, as I said. The UK market is incredibly important to us. When I first launched, I very quickly got an introduction to a powerful group in China, and we were moving. I think in our third or fourth vintage, we were moving 40% of my production into China, and I got a call a friend of mine. His name's Martin Gleave, and Martin's brother is David Gleave. David Gleave's a prominent wine guy in London. Well, he called me and he said, we were talking about your winery last night, and we recognized that you're selling all this wine into China. My brother has some advice for you. So we put him on the phone, and he's got the opportunity to speak with this very generous guy. And he said, John, I understand what you're doing, but you're never going to grow your brand if you send all your wine into China. It just disappears. If you want to grow your brand and the brand of your industry, get yourself into London, get yourself into New York, get yourself into the markets where the influencers are. And I got in touch with the government. A friend of mine was a minister, and I got in touch with the government. And all these years later, I've met you a number of years ago, because I've been coming to 67 Pall Mall, or I've been coming to Canada House and 67 Pall Mall now since I think 2012. And we're really getting there. So it's not like you're going to move a lot of wine. And London is the most competitive wine market in the world, but it's where all the influencers are. So I really want to have my wines recognized in this market. You won't be written up by Jancis Robinson if your wines aren't available in the market. Stephen Spurrier became a very good friend of mine, and I just love the guy. He was a really generous, a love of a guy, and a generous supporter and guide. He would gave me very sage advice on how and what we wanted to do, and I hosted him. He passed away 2 years ago now. I hosted him in the Okanagan Valley for about 4 or 5 days just before COVID, and he spoke to our community, and it was a remarkable thing, because he said before he was going to come, he said, I'm a little stressed. Should I be writing and preparing something to speak at this college that you want me to talk to 200 people? And I said, Stephen, don't. Just let's go to a number of wineries and tell us what you see. What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? And he turned to me and he said, like that gentleman across the room, should I tell him that you don't oak Pinot Gris? Well, that was an option. I said, look, if I told the guy you don't oak Pinot Gris, he'd tell me to get lost. If Stephen Spurrier told him don't oak Pinot Gris, he wouldn't oak Pinot Gris. So this is the advice that we need, and we're a young industry, and we need, and Stephen really did make an effort to try to give us some guidance, and that was just thank God to David Gleave that I got over here, and I got to meet these people. And now it's come full circle. I'm president of the Okanagan Wine Initiative. We're 8, or now soon we're going to be 9 exporters. And we're aimed highly. And instead of Painted Rock getting on lists, I'm intent on building the Okanagan earning a page on wine lists across the world. And we're starting to get there. The wine we're going to be tasting, this is our 2016 Syrah. And what I've tried to do this time is I've brought some wines with some age, because one of the things, it's all well and fine to bring and show consistency year after year. But now I know a lot of the people in the market here, so I want to give them an experience of some of my wines with age. So the Syrah, it's something that in our region is, to me, it's really one of the standard bearers, because it's a Syrah with incredible complexity and bright acidity. And you know what? If you can do it, you can do it. And I, in my journey internationally, I don't sell the wines, I listen. I go into places like Germany and I listen to what they're interested in and listen to their comments. And so we're in quite a number of Michelin star restaurants in Germany now. And they jokingly said, "Oh, now we don't have to buy from France." It was just so fun. But these are really, really good guys. And it was just, they were supportive of Canada, supportive of our initiatives, and really appreciative of the wines. And, we're a young region, but we're starting to know what we're doing well. And there's diversity, as I'd mentioned earlier. Like our warm red wine producing portion of the Okanagan Valley is probably 70 kilometers long. So it get more heat units further south, but ours is a little further north, so ours has perhaps brighter acidity. So celebrate your differences. Just know that they're going to be a little different. And everything that we produce is 100% estate. We don't commingle anything with anybody. We have 2 clones of every variety, and that's for complexity. So this is clone 99 and 100 of Syrah, and they're wonderfully compatible, and I'm very proud of it. What we did, it was an incredibly complex initiative that we did in studying the terroir before we planted it. So that was a year. That was a weather station in the middle of the property and sensors everywhere and augering a hole every 3 meters. Like, we just spent time. And now I've just acquired, I'm going to be planting 8 acres to the north, and it's contiguous with our property. And lo and behold, we're moving all that machinery, all that equipment over to that new property, and we're going to do the same thing. It's a little cooler, so it's going to probably have more Burgundy variety. So it's going to maybe have some Pinot Noir, some more aromatic whites. But that's the journey, and I've never been in a hurry to grow, because we're 28 net acres planted, and that's the size of Petrus. So I'm okay with that. That business plan worked, but now it's about if I have the opportunity to do it again on terroir that I know is consistent, because it was all part of the same original apricot orchard. I just bought the other side of the road, so it's not going to be. It'll probably expand our production by 25%, but. Incredibly exciting. Our grape growing, our whole methodology at Painted Rock is we work very closely with Bordeaux consultant Alain Sutra. I bring him over between 4 and 6 times a year, and it isn't about. This is his passion project. He's one of the most knowledgeable wine guys in the world, and so he comes and he works very closely with our winemaker Gabe, and it's a learning experience for Gabe. Like, probably one of the best in the world, and it's not. Gabe is a really good listener, and he's learned a tremendous amount, and the partnership is exquisite. So when we do the blendings, it's myself and Gabe and Alain in a room together, and the conversation is incredibly dynamic and participatory, and Alain's not trying to push anything at anybody, but it's a listen and learn. Now, if we've been doing it almost 20 years, I know a little bit. I know a lot more I did than when I started. But Gabe has learned a tremendous amount, and it's I think a great opportunity for our industry to be able to be coached by somebody with that kind of those kind of qualifications. We are very focused on sustainability, and we're organic. We're not certified organic. We have very strict protocol, and Alain is really, really committed to that. And at some point we'll go through the process, but we've just been busy with other things. But it's front of mind with us, and has been since day one. So Alain had this vision when he started to work with me that this was going to be his passion project. So I'm so thankful to have him on board, and it's incredibly collaborative and rewarding for both of us. Jancis Robinson, at the last time I was here, we had a dinner at 6-7 Pall Mall, and the theme of the dinner was Okanagan wineries that work with the Land Sutra. And she ended up writing an article in the Financial Times about Painted Rock and myself and Land Sutra, and she was wonderfully complimentary about him. I'm very proud of him. It's been a fun journey.
Great to hear again from John, whose intentional approach shines through at every stage of the story. And I love the part where he shared his introductions to the London wine trade, and all the wineries who made the trip had similar positive stories to share. I also appreciate his openness in sharing his use of technology, choosing sites carefully for the long-term benefit of the grapes and, of course, then the wines. We head now for our final winemaker conversation of the South Okanagan Valley to learn more about one of the valley's oldest wineries.
My name is Kira LaFranc. I'm the winemaker at Staggs Hollow Winery. We are located in the Okanagan Falls region of the valley. The winery itself, we've been around since 1995, so one of the older ones in the valley, which is lovely because we have such a breadth of knowledge to work with our founders having been one of the first 30 to plant in the Okanagan. So very cool. And the Okanagan Falls area is actually quite interesting and unique geologically speaking. We are the narrowest most point in the valley. So we are just south of Skaha Lake, and between there and Oliver, it's the most narrowest point. So the reason that's so special for us is that we are able to create these wines with such beautiful natural acidity because we're kind of sheltered by the western mountains. So we get this beautiful sun in the morning and early afternoon, but then past that it kind of cools off, which is beautiful for Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. In saying that, we grow a variety of grapes. One of them we'll taste later, but some very unique varieties that really lend themselves to that climate as well. Climatically speaking, or terroir speaking, the kind of most distinguishing features of the Okanagan Falls area is that you have these two distinct parts. So the southernmost part, the larger area, is made up of these kind of undulating kind of pockets where when the glaciers moved through, they broke off these pieces of ice, and then these big divots in the ground were left as these frozen lakes. So as those receded, they were left with these big pockets. So one of those, we have one on our property, which is where the hollow part of our name came from. So it allows us to grow a variety of grapes because it has such, so many unique aspects around the hollow. So we've terraced it, and we grow things like Tempranillo, Muscat down in the bottom where it's a little bit cooler, and then Pinot Noir up top and Merlot. So a huge range, but we're very lucky that way. We have actually vineyards in both areas of the Okanagan Falls sub-GI. So yes, there's a Kettle Hole portion, and then a little bit further north, there's this more flat area. So where our Shuttleworth Creek property is, where we grow a lot of Pinot and Albarino, it's an alluvial floodplain. So you have, way younger soils than over at Staggs Hollow, which creates a completely different flavor profile. We're quite new to the UK market, actually. This is our first time at this tasting, and we feel very lucky to be here. We've been actually in the UK for about, I would say, 6 months now. So we were taken on by Okanagan Roots, a lovely lady, Hallie, who is from the Okanagan, and she's really kind of spreading the love of Okanagan wines in London specifically. So we're really excited to be here and to be able to share kind of the excitement of what's happening in the Okanagan Falls region, but also in the valley. I think that Canada has been largely represented by ice wine, and it's really neat for people to see that we do other things quite well. so case in point, we have our 2020 Albarino in the glass here, which is quite exciting. We're one of only 2 wineries in the valley growing Albarino, although it grows beautifully, so I hope it kind of catches on. It's extremely vigorous, so you do need to kind of keep a handle on that, but otherwise the fruit is exceptional. So this is planted to our Shuttleworth Creek property, so that flatter, little bit cooler property that we have in the north section. But what we do with it is the majority of it goes into concrete. We have a very, very small portion that we leave on skins for a short time, and then the rest of it is pressed into neutral oak and stainless barrels. So for me, this wine is all about texture. Really beautiful mouthfeel, tons of lees stirring. We work with the lees constantly, and then kind of taper off as we feel like we've built up enough texture. But what I find really exciting is that these vines were only planted in 2012, but we're starting to see the salinity and the kind of savoriness that you find so much in Spanish Albarinos starting to come through. So, finding that in a very continental environment versus, a coastal is super interesting to me. Fermentation-wise, we keep it quite cool, so under 15 degrees Celsius. Generally, I aim for about 13 degrees just to really preserve the aromatics. With concrete, that's a little bit easier to achieve because you have, this natural kind of insulation that's happening. In barrels, the fermentations can get a little bit warmer, but then you get a little bit more of that richness as well. So I feel like that lends itself really nicely to the blend. But yeah, like I said, lots of lees stirring, lots of building texture that way. I think because of the salinity there and the minerality, I would definitely pair this with seafood. I think it goes phenomenally well with scallops in particular, but any kind of white fish. We had it with halibut not too long ago, and it was gorgeous. So definitely down the track of seafood, but
A lovely way to close the circle on the South Okanagan episode, and actually a throwback to the early days of the podcast in Spain. So interesting to see how the Albarino grape travels outside of northwest Spain. Do see below for details of all of the wineries and all of the wines tasted, as well as those all-important details of the importer or whether they're seeking representation. Also, do be sure to check out the contact details for Wine Growers British Columbia, who I had the pleasure of collaborating with to put this episode together. Next time on the podcast in episode 468, we continue this special series with an exploration of the North Okanagan Valley, again recorded at Taste Canada 2022 in the company of North Okanagan growers. See you then.